So, okay, well, this is going to be a question I've got to set up a little bit of context for here, because at the time that I joined OnGamers, so it was actually in the latter part of 2013, that we basically made the deal at Season 3 Worlds at the Staples Centre, right? When you were bringing me on, the reason I had to set this up is because otherwise this context, everyone's going to be like, yeah, so what, right? At the time, people won't know, I'd never had a scandal in esports. First of all, the idea there was scandals around people who were journalists in esports, like, already, you have to understand it was a very different world. Like, I was the guy, I was the fucking byline, I wasn't the story. Like, you know, no one ever interviewed me back there. Like, I was the fucking people doing the interviewing. So even if I was, like, one of the most famous esports journalists, you know, that meant I had, like, 4,000 Twitter followers or something, and, you know, 3,800 of them were all people in the industry just being mildly petty to me, you know, like, well, there was no fans, and definitely we weren't the stars, the players were the stars. So one thing that I actually, and another thing for people who don't know, I famously didn't appear on camera. I'd been on camera for like a few IEMs where I'd been the colour commentator, and even then, by the way, I was like the dry nerd commentator. I was the guy who was like, well, I think on this round they're going to do tactics, and actually I think they, you know, they should have bought differently there. And actually, famously, people used to go, he's making some good points, but it's not even, no charisma there, no personality, you know. And I've always told this story. There's a certain very famous person, you could probably get to, but don't, because I've never said the name. There's a very famous broadcast figure from the UK in esports who once just basically took me to one side in this era and told me, like, look, I know ESL, etc. hiring you, but if I were you, mate, I'd knock it on the head. You'll never make it on camera. Like, it's just not in your, it's not in your DNA, you know. In fact, you told me, by the way, at the time, what seemed like appropriate advice, that, you know, you'd be better off camera. Like, why don't you write the stats, or why don't you come up with a storyline or whatever? And I was like, yeah, you've got a point there, you know. Now, at the time you hired me, I hadn't obviously done the on-camera interviews. I hadn't made myself a persona like I am now. So then when you told me this comment when I was having the negotiation with you to join, it was a very weird comment. I actually didn't know what the fuck you meant, but it was mad prescient, actually. What you said to me was, you said as we were like basically agreeing to work together, you were like, you're going to be the hardest employee I ever hire. And I was like, what the fuck is he talking about? Like, I'm one of the best. Like, you know, I'm the guy who just gets my head down, I do my work, I'm super prolific. And I remember thinking at the time, what on earth does that mean? What, did you have any idea what you meant by that? Because obviously, like, listen, I think within something about 4 months, I'd already had that poll and shit. So you tapped into something.
Oh, I knew. So I knew that you were somewhere on the autistic spectrum, which, when you've managed people for a while, you start to see like different archetypes in people.
Sure.
Shouldn't fucking be a manager, you know? And what I saw in you was like, I'd read your content for a long time, I'd seen your videos, I'd heard your questions. You are a person with a very strong sense of right and wrong that's based in logic and reason. Most people probably don't attribute those types of values or thinking to you, but I do. I think you're bad at seeing the great nuances in life, but you're exceptionally clear-viewed when it comes to like the other sides of the spectrum. And it's symptomatic for many other people I know who are roughly the same place.
Sure.
And so when you have someone like that, then the things that we experience is just bound to happen. You know, I have it to a lesser degree, but I'm with you all the way. Like, I have some words that I will fight for, and like, I refuse to censor myself and not say this word right now because it's the technically correct and best describing word for the situation. So fuck you and your political correctness. And I saw someone who, when he would get triggered, would take a fight. I think you're a person who's willing to stand up for the little man or for injustice or unfairness when you see it and it touches you enough personally that, or that you feel like you can make a difference when you do it. You're a knight without armor in a world that doesn't necessarily love or need knights. So I pretty much knew what I was saying, and I at the same time completely underestimated what would happen. I thought it would be to a much lesser degree, but I thought that I would be the guy fighting for a team of weird oddballs in a company that didn't really have any place or mentality for weird oddballs.
Right. This might sound really weird from the outside, because actually, as I alluded to before, it was already, bear in mind this is an American company, already it was the world where, you know, the HR person, like, as soon as there's any minor thing, it's, you just get rid of the person, you get someone else in, they haven't had the problem solved, you know, hopefully people are replaceable. It's the American way of thinking about companies, right? When some of the things happened in my career, like the whole Poland shit, or later on, you know, you've said a mean joke about a player or whatever, one thing that might shock fans is, we've never, ever, ever actually had a discussion about any of those situations, right? Because you're a pretty matter-of-fact guy. Like, in that scenario, also, you aren't the guy who decides basically if they get fired or not. It's probably someone above your pay station. So what's funny is, if I tell people, when the Poland thing happened, I remember I called you and we were just talking. I was saying stuff like, oh, so it's going to, and you were like, listen, it's already happened. Here's what you're going to do. Like, you're going to not say something for 2 days or something, we're going to like handle that. Then you're going to come back. Like, here's how the job will keep going. You'll keep doing your job. If I don't hear anything, we'll forget about it. And then similarly, at the end, you just basically called me one day and you're like, look, I've got someone else on the line here. I have to have like a lawyer present to do this. Like, basically, we're going to have to let you go. It's going to be like this. Here's the terms. Like, here's like a severance package or whatever. Again, there was never any discussion because it wasn't like I wasn't on like a short trial. It wasn't like about your personal morals or whatever. Like, it was in that scenario. Did someone high enough up the food chain, potentially way above us, like obviously CBSI connects and like massive companies at the top. Essentially, the question is, do those people say you have to remove the person? If they don't, maybe you have to purview to keep the person. So how did you deal with some of those incidents? Because obviously we had, not just with me, we had other scandals with other people at the site and some of the incidents. How were you able to manage those things? It doesn't seem like you tried to make it actually like a personal or moral quandary,
Oh, like, so to take the latter part of the question first, like, who the fuck am I to judge people for a moral perspective, which I do is think that I'm a dumb party boy. Many people do too. I don't engage in political discussions almost on principle, because who cares what my opinion about these things are? There are people who think about these things all the time, and you should probably listen to them. What I look at in a person is that, do I believe that he intentionally did something stupid to accomplish something of personal gain? I never felt like you did that. Is the person still the same person I hired in terms of the quality of output of work? I just believe that you got better and better for every day that you were employed. And can I understand what happened in the situation? I know exactly what happened. When you did the dumb Poland comment, you had been working your ass off for, as far as I remember, 36 hours. And now I have this medical condition, so I can tell you that I know exactly what happens to my brain when I have pushed myself as hard as I can, and I go into situations like a social call or what would have back then been a webcam podcast or whatever, yes. Right? Like, you could have failed much harder, and I don't think you failed. I think you just made a dumb joke that some people who were kind of looking for an excuse to get angry about something got very angry about, including people in Poland who are, in my experience, often looking for an excuse to feel angry about things. It's the unhappiest people that I have ever... I lived in Poland for a year. Like, the lack of sun for thousands of years has just made them clinically depressed as a country. That's not racist. The Polish people are not a race. They are a place in geography. I thought it was a sign of things to come and what the world would become. And I guess pioneering esports was again sort of like on the front of cultural technology and how those two merge. It was bullshit. I had other cases later. I had one of my employees. I also ran a team on GameSpot, and I had one of the employees for all GameSpot competitions. That the winners seemed to be weirdly placed in the same city where he lived.
Right. Okay.
So what happens in those situations is that your boss, so in my case I was a general manager, comes and says like, look, we have a situation, or we found this problem. What do you want to do? This is your chance to also get rid of the person if you don't like the person. But I believe that what my personal feelings are for a person really shouldn't affect my working relationship with if I'm good enough as a person to like not let it. So I actually never took action on any of those things. I don't like firing people. I hate it. You're taking someone's livelihood away, and if you can make it work, I think you owe it to everyone involved in the situation to try to make it work. I'm not always good at making it work, but I try.
But obviously, one of the incidents we have to mention is the Reddit incident, because here's the thing that I will correct. I mean, we corrected it in that interview we did a few years back as well, but technically it was not getting banned on Reddit that like killed OnGamers. Basically, the sad reality of it all, which we actually all knew about 5 months in, is like OnGamers actually was, again, an idea ahead of its time. And at the time, the monetizations didn't exist. Like, I'll give you an example. Back then, I could get you literally as many hits as you want, because I'll just keep making more articles and we get the hits, right? The problem was it wasn't about the number of hits. It was about the hits are just to get the eyeballs, and then it's about the marketing team has to sell the bloody ads and all this. And that was where, guess what? Even if they were, I'm sure these were amazing people at GameSpot and CBSI. The problem was they didn't know esports, so I'm sure they could have sold, like a bunch of reviews for some fucking video game, but they didn't know the esports space. So even though we were getting actually fucking sick numbers, it didn't translate to anything. So to a fan, again, they were like, they thought it was about if we got the hits directly or did our numbers go down. Like that never would have affected it. And basically, I mean, it never really could have actually succeeded, right? It would have always petted out after. Maybe it could have gone a bit longer. Could it have gone like 2 years or something? But eventually, surely they would have like pulled the plug anyway, right?
The market was ready 1 year after we closed down, which is, again, I say, like, I'm usually too early.
Is that your trend, is it?
Yeah, it really is. So if we stayed in the game, we would have gotten there. It's actually the one miscalculation that I'm most, what's the word I'm looking for? Like annoyed or frustrated over that I made. I really thought the CBS thing through, and I thought this has a, maybe a 25% chance of succeeding and a 75% chance of not succeeding. Here are all the factors that count against it, and I could list them up. And what I put on this is why it could work list is that I think 6 months or so before I took the job, there was a strategist who was fucking smart, and he didn't fit in with CBS whatsoever. They didn't know what to do with him, so they wanted to make him executive, but they didn't want to give him like something to do because he was not that type of executive who should be running things. So they put him on chief strategy officer or something, and he saw esports and was like, "Oh, this thing is gonna fucking blow up." And he's saying this prediction in 2011 or something. So he was relatively early, right? And he went out and he bought the entire video inventory for Twitch, Major League Gaming, ESL, I think, I'm not sure. I think maybe something other. Basically, I remember reading the press release when I wasn't working there and thinking, wow, someone just shored up all the inventory in esports. And that was the CBS sales team that sold that. So the same people who sold OnGamers as a commercial advertising product sold all the video inventory in esports for about a year. 6 to 12 months or so. Then, of course, Twitch was like, okay, why are we giving 50% of our revenue to this company when we can just do it ourselves? ESL started thinking the same thing because as a few years had passed, it became very easy to all of a sudden sell your own product in an advertising thing online, right? So you didn't really need a company like that. So when I started OnGamers, I did it under the assumption that I had a sales team working for the company that knew, maybe one of the only sales teams in the world that knew how to sell esports. It turns out they had just sold video. They hadn't sold esports. They had just sold it as video, and anything that they could sell, they would run. So when I came with the esports product, they just looked at me like I was nuts. I can actually tell you that I was, for the first 5 months or so that I worked there, like I was looked at as a lesser person or as a person of lesser value to the company, to the point where people were like, "Why did we hire this idiot? Esports, this is stupid. Nothing will ever happen with it." And then Riot Games sold out League of Legends, Staples Center World Finals. Headlines changed all over the world, and boom! The day after, people started coming to me for the esports stuff, and all of a sudden we were seen as an entity within the games family that had like five different gaming websites, GameSpot being one of them, right? And when we broke the story for League of Legends player contracts, we had more traffic than GameSpot. That changed the perspective even more internally.